What'd you say? What'd you say?
You can't get good help since the war.
Oh my god, shut up. Okay.
Hello everyone, this is Kevin Kimball.
Callan.
And this is Katie, and you are listening to episode 5 of Hot Rods of the Sky. Hi everybody, and thanks so much for listening. We're sorry this episode's a little bit delayed, but Cal had some trouble. He was a little sick, so we had to kind of postpone recording. We didn't want to do it without him. We're not going to go into the gory details, but yeah, had to hold off for a couple of days. This week, well, in this episode, we're going to be talking about kind of a unique topic. We'll be chatting about the, quote, flying cigar, also known as the Lockheed Vega. So this one is probably going to be 2 parts. In this one, we're going to talk about the history of Lockheed, kind of where they started, all that good stuff. And then a little bit about the history of the Lockheed Vega itself. And then in the next episode, we're going to be chatting about the actual history of the Lockheed Vega that JKE Works is currently restoring, and then kind of a bit of the information of the start of that restoration project. All right. So as we know, Lockheed specifically, is responsible for a ton of awesome aircraft. Callan, what's your favorite?
SR-71. I mean, it's the fastest airplane on the planet.
How about you, Dad?
I'd say the P-38 is pretty cool. And then, obviously, I kind of dig the Vega, too.
Damn. Well, I was going to choose
alright, so I'll say Vega, and I'll say also the Lockheed Air Express.
Yeah, it's good. I was going to say either P-38 or the F-117. I just think it looks
that
cool.
Funky thing?
It's like a cool little thing. Yeah, I like it because it's funky. It's cool. The P-38 mainly because of Glacier Girl. That was like one of my favorite things to go see at all the air shows. Still is, but
it's fun to go see it before it was at air shows.
You saw it before? When did you see that?
When we went to Kentucky to see it.
1995. Yeah.
You weren't there that year.
Oh, well.
That was the year you were bad.
How do you remember? You were 4. What are you talking about?
You weren't there that year.
You were banished. You were banished.
I thought it was after that. I thought it was after the whole GB Katie problem, her running away. I thought that was the next year, but maybe not. Get pretty before all that then.
I ran away in 2005. Anyway,
it wasn't.
whatever.
Yeah, that was just one of the times you ran
away. Okay. Before we really get into it, I just wanted to feature one of the books that I got a ton of this historical information about Lockheed from. It is called Revolution in the Sky by Richard Sanders Allen. And it was a book that Dad just pulled down from the office and said, hey, you should check this out. I ended up spending a couple days just really combing through it and learning a lot of cool stuff. So if you're ever interested in more stuff, history, everything about Lockheed, definitely pick up that book.
Definitely the early years of Lockheed, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So, which now has put me in a fun position where I know a good amount of stuff that Callan and Dad don't know. So, haha, I've never felt this way before. So,
well,
nice.
You're the only one that likes to read out of the 3 of us, so.
Exactly. Yeah, you guys saw all the pictures, which it does have fantastic pictures, but also like really good info in there. It's like a Lockheed history book. All right, without further ado, let's get started. So our story this week for Lockheed history starts in 1889, so we're bringing it all the way back. Allen Haynes Lockheed, which is spelled Loughead, kind of like Loughead. He was born in 1889, and he grew up on a ranch with his mom and 2 brothers. In 1910, he was able to serve as a co-pilot in a homemade airplane in Chicago. This flight was actually the first ever, well, one of the first recorded dual-controlled flights in aviation history. So that was a pretty good nugget that I saw in there. Allen and his brother Malcolm spent 1.5 years working out of a small garage during their free time to design and build the Lockheed Model G. Now, before we started recording, I was like, oh, Callan, you can talk about the Model G. And Callan, what do you know about the Model G?
Absolutely nothing. I never even heard of it.
See, I just wanted him to say that because I actually know like 4 things about it. The Model G was an amphibious biplane. The upper wing spread was 46 feet, and it had a triangular fuselage that was about 30 feet long. It had mid-wing ailerons and a tail that swung on a universal joint. I have to be honest with you, I don't know what that means and how it changes, but it seemed interesting enough to mention twice in the book, so here we go.
Did you find a picture of it?
Yeah, they have like 40 pictures in this book.
Really?
We'll put a lot, I'll put a bunch of them on the, yeah.
Of the G?
Here, I'll show you. But I'll put a bunch of them, in the blog as well. But there are a ton of pictures of it. It's really cool. It's a small little amphibious biplane. But it originally had a little 2-winger. Had a Kirkham 6-cylinder engine. And it burst its crankcase, whatever that means, after about 15 minutes. So it did not last long. What does that mean?
It blew up.
Oh, cool. Awesome. So they replaced it with an 80 horsepower water-cooled Curtiss V8 power plant. So that one did not explode after 15 minutes. But yeah, that was their first stab at, engineering and building and creating all that stuff. And then after that, I believe it was after World War I, they decided to design the S1. And Dad, how much you want to take over as the S1?
Yeah,
a little bit.
The S1 was really where they developed the techniques for the molded plywood skin. Patented that particular process. I think Northrop was working with them at that time too. It was a small biplane, a little small radial engine powered single place open cockpit biplane, but it had that cigar tube kind of molded fuselage structure. And there's some photos that are out there, and certainly would be in the book here, of just 2 guys holding it up, and you can see how tiny it really is. It's pretty small, but it kind of is how they developed their technique, the process for the design of that monocoque wood structure. I always felt they probably, because it's post-World War II, post-World War I, they saw what some of the European molded wood airplane structures were being made and kind of took some inspiration at least from that. And when you look at it, in some cases it's definitely that way because on the Vega, for example, the thicknesses of the laminations of the skin are, in the drawings, are dimensioned in inches, but when you actually convert it over, because it's weird numbers, it's 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, 1 millimeter, numbers like that. So I think they were actually pretty well, plagiarizing almost on what was going on there, on how to do that wood structure. I think it was pretty cool that they did it. And I think they only built one of those, maybe. I think.
I do know that. From the book, they actually went bankrupt after it because the whole goal was to get normal people to be able to get into aviation and fly the plane. Their whole goal was to have every driveway or house has one of these.
Yeah.
Everybody exactly, like the poor man's biplane. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Somebody sent me some pictures recently that showed a picture of someone standing by some concrete molds, and they said, here's the Vega molds. And I said, no, I think that's the S1 molds because it's really tiny. Those molds would fit inside the Vega mold. So, yeah, anyway.
So after, the S1 was a cool little airplane, but they dumped a ton of money into it, and then, the trusty old Great Depression decided to take over, and they did not sell any of them. So Lockheed closed its doors in 21. But Alan Lockheed and Jack Northrop, the engineer that was working with Lockheed before it closed its doors, they never really lost the bug for it, and they wanted to design another airplane. They all went their separate ways and, got jobs different places. I don't remember where Jack Northrop went to work, but anyway. So they kind of brought it back together and decided to design a new airplane called the Vega. And according to the book, Northrop was the one that suggested the name for Vega because it kind of it kind of gave you the idea of speed. That was kind of the whole point, is to be, really fast. So kind of around the time that they were designing and building the new plane, James D. Doyle, head of the Hawaiian Pineapple Company, and if you've ever been to Disney or if you're an ice cream fan, did I say Doyle? I'm so sorry, it's Dole.
You just said Doyle. Dole.
I know what I said. I meant Dole. Just like the Dole Whip. If you've ever had one of those. I actually hate pineapples, but I do like Dole Whip. Super good. Anyway, that guy, he offered $25,000 to the first person that could fly from North America to Honolulu. So, everybody was kind of jumping in on that. And this was after, oh my god, I totally had a brain fart. What is,
I want to sit here and wait for you to struggle with this for a little bit before I tell you the answer.
His baby got kidnapped, and Lindbergh. Okay, the Lindbergh baby. All right,
there you
I gotta
go.
figure that one out. There it is. Charles Lindbergh, as we talked about in one of the first GB episodes, when he did not fly around the world, which is what I said before, but I was totally wrong. When he crossed the Atlantic and landed in Paris, that was the whole start of the golden age of aviation. So Mr. Dole, Mr. Pineapple, wanted to get, his own people excited about it, so he wanted to get his own little prize and race going. So he offered the $25,000, which, in the 20s and 30s is a crap ton of money. So I don't know the actual exchange rate, but whatever. So George Hurst Jr. actually purchased the first Lockheed Vega before it was even finished. He was like, I want this, and I want to use it for what was then called the Pineapple Derby. He's like, I want to dog in this race. This is going to be awesome. I want that $25,000 and bragging rights to say that he won. He bought it for $12,000. So, and Lockheed and Northrop both knew that that was going to be kind of a lowball price, but they were totally okay with it because of the recognition and the advertising they would get from entering into the race. So
that once the sale was actually set up to go to Hearst, for $12,000, which is half the prize money. So, no matter what, he was standing up. If it worked out, he was going to make some money. I think it was on July 4th and 27 when they flew the first prototype Vega. And, that was like 6 weeks before the Pineapple Derby was supposed to happen. So it was pretty short order and not a whole lot of time to test it and make sure everything was going to work. And then the pilots that were chosen for that were Jack Frost and Gordon Scott. And I think the airplane held like 360 gallons of fuel. So that it meant it was mostly in the fuselage where the passengers would normally be in the future, filled up with gas. And the airplane was named Golden Eagle, and it headed off across the Pacific. And everybody waved goodbye, and that was it. Nobody ever saw it again.
Yeah, never came back. Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's a lot, going through the book, there's a lot of, as with many airplanes back then that just, crashed in the middle of the ocean. There's a lot of guesses, and, they ran out of gas, or, they overshot it, but there's really no way to definitively know. Like, they couldn't, really.
Yeah, we didn't have satellites to tell them if the weather was going to be good or bad. They could have just flown in some nasty weather, and that was the reason it never came back.
Just think of like the compass and the navigation stuff. If the compass is out of calibration by a degree, you're missing Honolulu, Hawaii at all by hundreds of miles probably. It's major. It's not like you're going to hit another mass of land. It's just like spot. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, never found it.
Yeah.
Down we go.
Mm-hmm.
terrifying. It reminds me a little bit. You remember Dinotopia?
Mm-hmm.
Remember when they're like flying? The two brothers are flying with the dad, and they're like going, and then they hit bad weather and they crash and they end up on this island full of dinosaurs.
Yeah.
That's like, as I was reading this, I was like, oh my god, like you know, so they just get thrown off course. But that was, nobody will ever know and what exactly happened.
Well, even with Amelia's flight, she had other radio stuff on board to talk to ships throughout her thing and to help her stay on course. It wasn't just she took off and went a direction. She had other checkpoints and stuff. Yeah, she had his CB radio or ham radio or whatever was in the airplane talking to ships the whole way.
And that's really
just her.
What's kind of cool is that then you had so many of these early Lockheeds being used for record-setting events or exploration, things like that. You know, like flying to the North Pole, Winnie Mae, with Wiley Post, doing all the fantastic flights that he did around the world and stratosphere and just so many things, and pushing the boundaries of people. Also the machines. These things force the machines to get better, engines to get better, communications to get better. The invention of the first pressure suit to be able to go to 50,000 feet. All these things were major, major accomplishments that were done with these early Lockheed airplanes. By just not by Lockheed, but by individuals who would buy the airplanes or have sponsors buy the airplanes and do these fantastic feats. So it really pushed aviation.
The airplanes were strong enough and sturdy enough to do this stuff. It wasn't a Model 4 that's fabric and couldn't take the beating. The Vega could take a beating, which is pretty amazing.
I think the cool thing that is that it the first rather publicized, whatever publicized meant at that time, but the first flight, the first big showing of the Vega, took off, and then, obviously didn't go so great. And, while I was reading, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's really going to tank, the orders coming in or whatever. But it really didn't, like people, that was just kind of the name of the game back then, I guess. It was a dangerous flight path that they were going. It didn't really hinder them sales-wise, and, it was a great plane, and people really didn't go, oh, that didn't work out well, let's buy something else. So I thought that was pretty cool. And they started racking up quite a bit of orders. Like, they had to move to a bigger warehouse and try and keep up with all that stuff. And then, of course, Amelia Earhart, not our dog Amelia Earhart, but Amelia Earhart, the famed pilot, set two of her aviation records in her Lockheed 5B, right? 5B Vega? I don't know. I typed B, but that might not be the correct one.
Yeah, that's correct.
And in 1932, she flew it all by herself across the Atlantic Ocean, across the Atlantic Ocean, obviously nonstop.
Well, can we hold on just a second right there? With that flight across the Atlantic Ocean, I think it's pretty important to think about. It's 5 years after Lindbergh did it, only 5 years. And now she's doing it, and she did it in less than half the time. So, he was 33 hours and change, and she did it in 15 hours or something like that. So maybe it's not exactly the same course, but the idea that in 5 years, basically halved the time it took to get across the ocean that would have been, previously just traveled by an ocean liner.
Boat.
So it's pretty significant change, yeah.
I think that's the cool part about this time in aviation in general is just how fast things are changing. I mean, if you just do the math, like, people have only been flying for 30, less than 30 years in ever in the history of humankind. Right. And then it's just record after record and growth after growth after growth, and it's just for me it's just terrifying, and it just takes a special kind of group of people to push things and try things, and they had
to believe in the machines themselves, just have that leap of faith that what they what they knew in their head was going to happen would get done. And, there's people that do that. There's people that, it went on for generations, and that's how we ended up going to places in space and actually just putting even pieces of hardware in space. But to me, in this particular time, the advancements that were happening with aviation and flight in general were at, each year, like you're going half again faster or half again farther or twice as far, big monumental steps that, it's almost as though there's it's an exponential curve, decay to where it was really vertical and a lot of advancement was happening in a hurry. And then as time went on, the curve is flattening out. And since we first went to the moon, we haven't figured out how to go to the moon twice as fast.
Yeah.
It's still about the same amount of time to get to the moon. So there's little things like that when you look at it as a scope of change during this particular period in time and in flight, the change was rapid. And it was changes in the equipment, the people, the capabilities, and then what you could do with this technology was pretty mind-blowing. And you were talking about promotional. I mean, she was well promoted because her husband was a promoter guy, right? Wasn't that his deal? Publicist, yes. So there's a lot of, we talked before, there were a lot of female aviators that had fantastic and amazing accomplishments during the same time period, but they just didn't get the press. But she did do some pretty amazing things and partnered with some wonderful manufacturers like Lockheed, and were able to do these things. So it's pretty neat.
Well, and I think it was around the time because Lockheed is spelled, like we said before, like Loughead, and people were mispronouncing it. And when they tried again with the Vega after they had gone bankrupt in 21, it was, the book didn't say exactly when that change happened, but I think it was around the time that the Vega, started to pick up a little bit, that they actually changed the spelling to Lock, L-O-C-K, the normal, like how you would pronounce it, the phonetic spelling or whatever it's called, because, looking at it, I'd still today pronounce it wrong, so. But, I thought that was a curious thing that, I like the random facts for whenever they decided to spell it different, but it didn't say exactly, but around that time, late 20s or so was when they decided to spell it the way that people would pronounce it, which makes a lot more sense. And then...
and in there's another example of what they were doing in the time is, they weren't hard, fast on their name being historically correct. They wanted to make sure that their customers and industry would understand who they are. And if you were going to say, oh yeah, I have a Lockheed, but it's spelled Loughead, do you even know that that's the same airplane or the same product? So, I mean, exactly. from a marketing and get out there and everybody know who you are standpoint, it was pretty smart to go ahead and go with that phonetic spelling and create something that became now is one of the most renowned names in the world of machines, aviation, space, whatever, so many things,
Well, and in the book Revolution in the Sky, that I got a lot of this information from, the opening of it starts with a little boy watching all of these planes come in, and he's got like a few people next to him, and he's just going crazy about him. He's going, you see those are Wacos, and those are this, those are that, and oh, you can hear it, here comes the Lockheeds, so just like you were saying, people being able to pronounce it and kids being big fans of it, like it was a big deal from a marketing standpoint. And so Amelia's first Vega was the 5B in 1930, the little red bus, and then after that, which one did she have, Cal? It was
still, she painted it red. It was another one. It wasn't like another name.
I know, but it was a different model, right? I think it was
the first one was
a 5C a few years later.
That's the one that's in the Smithsonian. The first one was I I think, what was it, it was a Vega 2, right, Dad? And then they converted it to a 5B or whatever. Yeah, I mean, they all were converted at some point because they wanted bigger motors on them, so it was just put the big block in kind of thing. But she wrecked it and needed a new airplane, so she bought another airplane, and most of the records were in the second airplane, I think. It's pretty early on that she wrecked it.
Yeah, and then the one that's in the museum now in the Smithsonian, that was originally, it went to the Franklin Institute, I believe, after her records. She went across the Atlantic, and then she did the North American cross country deal, from LA to New York, and did that one, and then it was donated. I mean, it was funny on a lot of these trips. Like when it went across the ocean, then it came back on a ship. It flew over there, but then they shipped it back on a boat. And then, there's pictures of that, lifting up onto the ship. Yeah. Well, there was a lot of things that it was easier to go west to east, so that like LA to New York, it's the easiest way to go. So it's harder to go from the west, from the east to the west. Yeah, you just jump up, wait for the world to spin, and then land again, right? So, in this, in this particular case, it was still a west to east kind of a deal, and then we know of some other airplanes that later there were some derbies that were actually the other way, and it was quite difficult, even on the continental U.S. to get it done. There was one race that was from east to west, and I think 8 airplanes of all different types were entered, and none of them made it. It was just kind of a bad deal. But in any event, so her airplane ended up in the Franklin Institute, and then later in the Smithsonian in the 60s, I think is when it ended up in the Smithsonian. And it's really a pretty neat, historically accurate, preserved airplane. We have quite a few photographs inside and out and around of it that really help us on our project. And it's pretty neat that for the most part it's untouched in all those years. Been repainted and things, but
and I think from like a historical point of view, I mean, Lockheed only had, let's call it, there's probably some more designs in between, but the 2 notable planes before the Vega. So you had the Model G, the S1, and then the Vega. And, coming from, I don't know, I feel like that's a pretty good record to just kind of shoot your shot. And then they created an amazing aircraft in the Vega to where it was, this profound with all the explorers and record setters. And, and when you see how massive this plane is, until the other day, I didn't realize this was initially made for speed. It looks huge. When I think speed, I think the GB, little, very, but this thing is, it took you guys like an hour and a half just to get the wing to fit in the hangar. Like it was not, I wasn't thinking speed at all before I read this book. So, I mean, like Lockheed and Jack Northrop, of course, and everybody else involved, was, I mean, it's not luck. It's all ingenuity and stuff. But
there was a heck of a team that were assembled there. I mean, the Lockheed brothers. You had Jack Northrop, who later went on to have the Northrop Aircraft Company, and then on and on and on down into history. And now there's Northrop Grumman, which are 2 companies that have since merged. But you also had names like Jerry Vultee was there. You had, which later was Vultee Aircraft in War II and beyond. And then you had Richard Palmer, who was there and later ended up going to work for Hughes and helped design the Hughes Racer. So there's just a lot of really, really talented people that were assembled into, almost like a dream team of the day to be able to put this pretty awesome design together. And then they didn't just stop with the Vega. You had the Vega. There were actually 3 different airplanes or designs that Lockheed called a Vega. The Vega 1, Model 1. The Model 2 was called a Vega. And then the Model 5 was called a Vega. So there were originally 8 different designs, 1 through 9. skipping 6 for some reason, but 1, 2, and 5 were Vegas. 3 is the Air Express. 4 is the Explorer. 7 was an Explorer. 8 is the Sirius and Altair, and 9 is the Orion. And all of these designs were built with the same basic components. So the same fuselage shells, diaphragms in the fuselage, wing ribs, but it might be a high wing airplane or a low wing airplane, or in the case of the Air Express, parasol wing with an open cockpit. So there were different configurations they built using these construction and basic design techniques to satisfy certain needs. So they're pretty cool in how they were able to do that. And then so that covers the first basically 9 designs by Lockheed, and they're all made from these same basic components.
Well, and I think for just for this part 1 of this, we really wanted to cover the very short history of Lockheed before it started producing Vegas. And next week, we're going to be talking about the history of the Vega that is currently sitting in the hangar at JKE Works, and the first few years of the restoration process for that Vega. I got to be pretty talkative this week because I did a lot of reading and I felt smart. Next week, I'm going to go back to feeling dumb and not knowing anything, so I cannot wait for that. But I'm reveling as much in this week as I can. And just a short note, we'd never want to, mention anything in a political sense or anything at all, but we did want to feature one of our friends over at Aircraft Studio Design, Mirko, Simone, and Federica Pecorari. They are doing a really cool project where they're selling merch. They have a cool design for the Ghost of Kiev. Is it Kiev or Kiev or... I don't know if I pronounce it wrong, I'm sorry, but it's a really cool design. They've got it on hoodies, shirts, cups, everything. If there's something that you want that design on that's not in the shop, email them and let them know. We're going to put the link in the show notes here. 100% of the profits from the sale of this is actually going to help people. They know of some people that are actually in the Ukraine right now, but it's going directly to help those people. So if you have some spare change and you want a really cool shirt and design merch, definitely click that link that we'll have in the show notes and just check them out. We're also going to share it on our Facebook as well. Like we said, 100% of it goes to help other people. And once again, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We're trying to make the episodes a little bit shorter, easier to digest. Thanks for listening to part 1 of this series. Next week we'll hit part 2. And then after that, we're going to have a really fun guest. We'll dive back into the GB. So thank you guys so much and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.